Schneider,
Present.
Councilmember Holliber. Councilmember Holliber. Councilmember Fung,
Here.
Vice Mayor Pappen.
She's logging on right now.
Yeah, I saw her in the weight room. Vice Mayor Pappen. Can you hear me, Vice Mayor Pappen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Oliva.
Here.
Okay, 4 members of the City Council are present. Councilmember Holliber is not present. Planning Commissioner Del Negro,
Present.
Planning Commissioner Quigg,
Present.
Planning Commissioner Wong, Planning Commissioner Wong, I did see him on earlier.
He did a sound check with you.
Yeah. Planning Commissioner Wong. Might have lost him. Vice Mayor Davis,
Here.
Chair Joe.
Present.
Okay, once again, Planning Commissioner Wong, if you can hear me. I see your iPhone is there. Four members of the Planning Commission are present. Can't seem to get a hold of Planning Commissioner Wong.
Oh, here.
Oh, there you go. Okay, all members of the Planning Commission are present.
Councilmember Holliber's here.
And I do see Councilmember Holliber has joined the meeting as well.
Perfect. Then Councilmember Holliber, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, from there, we are going to go to existing business, which is our joint study session of the City of Millbrae City Council and Planning Commissioner to discuss the downtown and the El Camino Real specific plan. I'm sure we have a beautiful staff report.
We do, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening to you. Good evening to the council and to the Planning Commission. I would just like to introduce Ms. Darcy Smith, Community Development Director, for a few opening comments, and then she'll hand it over to WRT, our consulting design and land use planning team.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council, and Planning Commissioners. Thank you for being here tonight. We're really excited to show you this specific plan. I know some of you might remember we started this process back in 2015. So you've been waiting 7 years. I know, hard to believe. Well, time flies, and we're here tonight and really excited to show this to you. So Jim Stickley from WRT should be screen sharing if he can bring up the presentation.
Let's see, it says I'm disabled for screen sharing. Can someone give me access to that?
Hi again, we just tried to give you access.
Okay. Okay, that looks good.
Okay, great. So we are here tonight. You might remember last time we were together, we talked about the general plan. We had 2 very successful study sessions on the general plan, and we told you we'd be back in March Madness for the specific plan, and here we are. This is really a check-in on major policy direction. We're at the 30,000 foot level here, and I think we've promised and we've come back for regular check-ins, and I think we all agree they're very successful. So how's the screen sharing coming? We still can't see it.
It should be up.
No, we can't see it, but I'm gonna try one more time and then I can step in, no problem.
You can't see it either.
Okay, let me try again. Share. Okay, how's that?
Just put it in PowerPoint mode. Yeah, great. So the objective tonight is to receive the presentation regarding the preliminary draft downtown and Camino Real specific plan. We'll take council and commission comments. We'll have time for questions and answers, and we'll receive public comment on it. And again, we're here for confirmation, see if there's any major changes needed. Next slide. The focus again is on the specific plan. I already got a question. Well, didn't we already see this? You saw the streetscape plan back in December. Covers look similar, but that just focused on streetscape. That was also quite voluminous. This is the actual specific plan, which under state statute, as Jim will explain later, has a lot of meaty details for the development standards. There are 4 appendices. You're seeing Appendix D tonight, the parking requirements. That's at the very end of the plan. There's 3 appendices. You saw the streetscape plan already in December. We're putting the finishing touches on that. We'll have that back for you in a few months. We are also working on my favorite part of the plan, the infrastructure analysis and financing plan, because with any great plan, we need to have a plan for financing the public infrastructure and knowing what the infrastructure needs are for really important things the city provides to our community, such as wastewater, stormwater, and parks, and other important capital facility and infrastructure. So those are coming. Next slide. So I think you've seen the slide a few times, but this is a big undertaking for the city. But I actually think we really kind of outsmarted ourselves in putting it all together with the general plan, the specific plan, the active transportation plan, and a lot of components. But with these meetings, we're making a lot of progress, and we're getting a lot of great feedback. So we can finalize all these for adoption. Next slide.
Well,
hang up a little bit. There we go. Okay. So we have a big team of consultants working on it tonight. Main presenter, you see Jim Stickley with WRT and his lead project manager, Poonam Nakar, is also here tonight. A lot of other consultants, including our general plan team led by Jim Harnish and Brent Gibbons. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention we have a huge city team. And what you're seeing in the specific plan, we've been working on, like the general plan you saw last month, we've been working on for months, and it's been reviewed by all the major city departments and divisions, as well as our outside contract agencies, CCFD and the Sheriff's Department. And a lot of review work went into this. We also had it thoroughly reviewed by our city attorney staff, Mike Connerin, assistant city attorney, and Ellis Raskin, special attorney who's helping us with these advanced planning documents. And then we have our planning team, Roscoe Mata, plan manager, and Nestor Guevara, associate planner and project manager, put a lot of time into what you see tonight. And again, we're all here to answer questions if you have them. Next slide. And the process. So last year, about this time, you reinitiated the project. And in the fall, you adopted the active transportation plan, which is great and informed a lot of the work in the specific plan around circulation and active transportation modes. We've had study sessions already on the general plan update. Now you're seeing the specific plan, and the goal is in just a few months in the summer to get what's called the draft environmental impact report published. It's a voluminous environmental analysis document that we publish and have a 45-day review period. And with that publication, we publish what we'll call the final public review draft. So that the feedback we're getting tonight, I want to emphasize, is on what we call the preliminary drafts. They're just like that. Early drafts where we want to get meaningful, positive feedback and know the changes we have to make as we move into this next phase of release of the public review drafts and the environmental impact report. And again, we're aiming for summer with the goal in the fall, by the end of the year, to have adoption of everything and certification of the EIR. And I think I'll just say that when I saw the specific plan released last week, I thought, yes, we're there. We've made a huge amount of progress just past few months, and to see a final preliminary draft that really has a lot of, I'll say, beautiful renderings, great photographs, and lots of bells and whistles, and a lot of robust details as Jim will step through. I thought, well, we're going to make this. So very great work for everyone who's been working on this to get us to this point. Next slide. So this specific plan, and Jim will talk in more detail, but I just want to pause here and emphasize, this is a big chunk of our city. It really, if you look at the map here, we took off like a little chunk with the Millbrae Station Area Specific Plan, which was originally adopted back in 1998 with development of the station and updated in 2016. And we're not changing that. It works really well. You know, we've consistently worked on implementing that through different projects. But this large other area of the city, including most of El Camino Real and our downtown and a few other large properties east and west of El Camino Real, it's our future growth area. It's where we want to emphasize our housing to meet arena needs, emphasize transit-oriented development along the bus line and near the station, and provide a mix really of almost all uses except industrial. So as Jim will mention, we have housing, we want to accommodate new restaurants to serve the new residents so they don't have to drive. We want to accommodate retail to serve them. We want to enable hotels, which are a great source of transit occupancy taxes. We want to enable offices, especially community serving offices, and entertainment and other community uses, as Jim will explain. And yeah, as a reminder, we already have the Millbrae Stationary Specific Plan. We're not touching that, but this will build upon that as a really successful corridor and downtown plan. Next slide. I think at this point, I turn it over to Jim, who will step through the plan in more detail. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Darcy. So we're really excited to be here tonight. This is an important step in the development of the specific plan. And what I'm going to do is take not a lot of time. I'm going to clip through fairly quickly the different components of the plan and sort of highlight some of the main points, including comments that we received from all of you back in September when we had a study session on the specific plan as it was being developed at that time. But really just to sort of give an overview of what's in the plan. So like all plans, this one starts with a vision. And so the vision for this specific plan is really to create livable and vibrant districts for downtown that contain regionally and locally serving uses, that have a range of housing choices. And this gets to the point Darcy made about meeting our arena targets, but also has choices for office space, for retail, for cultural amenities and restaurants. And entertainment, but then also prioritizing access to transit. So El Camino Real is a transit corridor, but it's also connecting to, you know, arguably one of the largest transit stations in the Bay Area, and that's a real asset for the community. So we want to firmly connect to that. And then another part of the vision is the notion of having safe and well-designed public spaces. So that includes streetscape, but it also includes other kinds of public spaces. So this is an image that actually came out of our collaboration on the streetscape plan and sort of became a rallying cry, if you will, for some of the principles behind especially El Camino Real. How do we break that corridor down into something that's more human, more approachable? But the image really also has a lot of the elements that we're talking about in the specific plan itself in terms of building scale, the quality of architecture, sort of the vibrancy of ground floor uses in the buildings as an element that animates the streets, and then this mix of different modes of travel and this comfortable, safe feeling of, you know, being able to be a pedestrian or be a bicycle and have the street not dominated by vehicles. So this was sort of useful for us to sort of clarify our thinking about what some of the objectives were. The specific plan is really structured around 6 major goals, and there are policies and then later development standards and guidelines that support these goals. The goals have to do with land use, having the right mix of land uses to get all of the activities that you want happening in your downtown. The urban design, what those land uses look like, right? What the building character is, what the public space character is. Housing, making sure that we've got a lot of capacity here to meet the arena targets, to have a range of choices for people at, you know, at different price points, at different income levels. The city image and programming, you know, how does this contribute to Millbrae's identity, and do we have those strong identity elements built into the plan? And then the whole world of circulation, transportation demand management strategies, and parking. How are we dealing with all those things? And then lastly, open space and public realm. So those six goals then are met through providing a strong framework for the plan. And the framework is made of three things: land use and urban design framework, public realm and streetscape framework, and circulation framework. And what these frameworks do as they interact with each other is they guide the character of infill, they guide the design and character of streetscape and public realm, and they prioritize transportation improvements. What are those things that get higher quality mobility, more mobility choices, better connections to transit? And then what are the space making, the placemaking strategies that we're employing here to really make this downtown special and feel like it's part of the Millbrae community? So this diagram sort of embodies that framework. And what you see here is a series of districts starting in the south with the downtown district, which is firmly connected to the station area. And then with its main street being Broadway, but also, you know, the El Camino Real is a secondary main street, if you will, that passes through the downtown district. And then the next district to the north of that is the community anchor. So this would be the area roughly between Taylor and Meadow Glen, where there's already some larger commercial uses that have been developed there and have been operating for a number of years. How do we build on those to create a strong community anchor? And then north of that, a district that is much more residential in character. So we transition to something that is, you know, more residential in feel, and the El Camino Real corridor has more of a parkway character and through some of the landscape strategies. And then the furthest north is the neighborhood anchor. So this is another little commercial node, but it's serving more the neighborhood surrounding that area rather than being a community-wide anchor. So that's a framework sort of summary diagram, but it's made of these other components: the public realm and streetscape framework. How are all of these districts connected together, and how do they feel safe, and that there's ample public space to serve all of those land uses within the districts? What's the circulation framework, and how are the modes balanced? So the big move here is the provision of protected bike lanes on El Camino Real. But we also looked at a number of areas where we could widen sidewalks to create better pedestrian environments, where we could create safer crossings, more crossings of El Camino Real. Sometimes those crosswalks are limited. You have to go, you know, another block or to the other side of an intersection before you can cross, and things like that. So really making a more complete network that makes pedestrians and bikes feel safe. And then all of those framework elements are supporting a series of land use regulations. So the purpose of the land use regulations are twofold. It's to make sure that future development is compatible with the existing scale of the community, and also to make sure that we're not overly dictating land use. So this is really more of a form-based code where we're creating the envelopes for development, we're controlling the scale of those envelopes, but we're not dictating what land use has to go in there. And the reason for that is to provide flexibility for what the market wants to build. Currently, there's a lot of demand for housing, and so you probably would get more housing proposals from landowners and developers. In the future, maybe in 5 years or more, there might start to be a return to demand for office. And so the plan wants to have the flexibility to be able to adapt to those market conditions. The land use designations there are 5 of them, and they're listed on the right side, and those are depicted in this diagram. So if you look at the key in the upper right, starting with the downtown mixed use is the red area, and that has a particular set of standards of what regulates development in that area. The blue area is a corridor mixed use. So these are mixed use that allows commercial, it encourages ground floor active uses, And in response to a comment from you all in September when we met, giving a commercial preference to this central area, so the red hatches. And as I said before, this is the area where, you know, we have the Safeway, you have Millbrae Square, the Office Depot site is looking at as some different potential uses. This is an area where we could have a strengthened commercial core to the downtown. And so that's what that the red hatch designation is. And then as you move forward northward, the land use turns more to residential focused mixed use, and then further north from that to this neighborhood commercial area. We're not going to read all this, but we looked at a very fine grain into what the permitted and non-permitted uses and also conditionally permitted uses are in each of those land use designations. So should definitely review these carefully and, you know, let us know your comments on those when you've completed your review. And then all of that is codified, if you will, with development standards and guidelines. And the purpose of these are twofold. One is to ensure that the future development is in keeping with the vision that we've developed with all of you and with the community and the stakeholders. We want to ensure that the outcome of development is what everyone says they want downtown Millbrae to be. And so the development standards help us do that. And then the second is to have a tool that the city staff can review development proposals, and they can have a plan that's very clear about what the standards are to assist with that review process. One of the most important aspects of those standards are the building heights. And we worked a lot on this. We did a 3D model, which a number of you may remember from our September session. And we went back and manipulated that model many, many times and trying really craft this in a way that really works mainly for the scale transitions to the neighborhoods. So in general, the heights allow for an 85-foot building height through the almost the entire length of El Camino Real, but then that steps down on Broadway to 55. And there's a portion in the center in that community anchor area that I had mentioned before, where 65 feet is allowed, but just there. Otherwise, it would be 55 feet. And then it also steps down on the east side in the Hemlock neighborhood on the backside, so that 85-foot height that faces El Camino Real has a step down enough to where it starts relating more to that neighborhood scale. And then something I think one of you caught on our September meeting was that we hadn't really paid enough attention to the step down on Northern Broadway. So we've got this whole length up here, where again, we're stepping down from 85 feet to 55 feet, and even lower as you get towards the north, stepping down to 30 feet to create that interface with the adjacent neighborhood. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about that with some cross sections. But what this does, and this is in the plan, but this addresses the density and intensity issue. So it's establishing FAR, which is the measure of intensity, and then it's establishing dwelling units per acre, and that's done as a range in most of these land use designations. And in response to some of the comments we got from this group, but also from city staff, is that we would want to make sure that range is sufficient to allow for, you know, a broad range of housing types and not limit developers who would like to provide affordable housing. And so we worked on those ranges of DUs per acre. So you can see in the downtown mixed use, parcels fronting Broadway would be 25 to 50 DUs per acre. Parcels facing El Camino Real would be 70 to 110 DUs per acre. So we really zeroed in on those, and the goal was to make this attractive to developers so that they could build the kinds of projects that the market is demanding. And so these are some of the cross sections that illustrate that. So on the top is Broadway with an existing building on the left and one of the new 55-foot infill allowed heights on the right. And then on the bottom cross section is if two projects happen to go in across the street from each other and they both get built to the 55 feet, that's what that would look like. And we were tried to be very careful to follow sort of an industry standard for the ratios of building height to street width. So this 2-to-1 ratio of these dashed rectangles with the diagonal lines are sort of an accepted industry standard that allows sunlight into the corridor and also allows for human scale, how it feels when someone is experiencing the corridor. So the narrower the street, the lower the buildings want to be, and vice versa. And where we do exceed those rectangles, you can see we have a strong step back, but then only one story in addition after the step back. So we tried to be really sensitive to those urban design standards. Same thing with El Camino Real. Obviously a much wider corridor, and so taller buildings can still fit within the 2-to-1 ratio norms, but still integrating step backs into that will further bring scale and the human environment to the corridor. This one is with the frontage road, so you can see the frontage road over here on the left-hand side. And then this next cross section is without the frontage road. And this is a narrower condition in the northern part of the corridor. And what we've also put in the standards here is an additional setback to start to allow for residential stoops along those frontages. So that would be a really nice way to give this much more of a residential character as you get into the north corridor. And then these are a couple of specifics. Again, these came up in our previous study session with you all. How do we transition between El Camino Real and Hemlock? So you can see that in the top cross section, a very pronounced step back, maintaining the 45-degree angle for solar access. And so we're not overly shading the backyards of the single family area. And then in the bottom cross section, the transition from El Camino Real to Broadway. And so this shows the 65, which would be the maximum in that central zone, but it would actually be lower than that in all other areas outside of the central zone along Broadway, and then stepping up to 85 feet on El Camino Real. So these are actually literally pages from the specific plan, and this can all be reviewed in more detail at your leisure, but I'm just wanting to show some of the highlights of changes that have been made since we last met. This is where it all sort of comes together in these overall views, where you can see the fabric of where these infill sites along El Camino Real, how that might look, how that steps down to probably lower and fewer infill opportunities along Broadway. So we would expect most of the change to happen on El Camino Real, and less so along Broadway, where you really have an established fabric. So that's in the central downtown area. This is going a little bit farther north in the Millbrae Square area with Safeway off to the lower left here, and then the Office Depot site in the upper right. And then you can see some infill properties on the other side of El Camino Real, how that would look on El Camino Real corridor, and then how it would step down to Broadway on the backside, as you see in this the building on the top right. And then this is going further north, where we're now stepping down even more, addressing neighborhood adjacencies. So this is showing a townhome configuration for parcels that are fronting El Camino Real, and then stepping down to the existing single family on the backside of that. And then this small sort of mixed use neighborhood anchor in the upper right that I've mentioned before a couple times. This is not to read all this, but this is just to say that we took a detailed look at step backs, setbacks rather, making sure that we have zero setback where we want that, where we want shop fronts to come right to the edge of the sidewalk, and then other places where we might want a little bit of a setback. And some of these are actually useful along El Camino Real, where we have a very constrained right-of-way. If we can have a 5-foot setback, it allows us to widen the sidewalk in those areas. And we think that would be needed when we're starting to have the intensity of the mixed use that we're recommending in that area. And then we paid a lot of attention to massing and modulation. This is sort of the crafting of, these aren't just blocks of development that are going in, but they need to be sculpted and shaped so that they they really contribute to the urban environment, and they have modulation and they have ins and outs, and the modulation can be vertical and can also be horizontal with step backs. And so really shaping these buildings so they fit and contribute to the urban environment in a high quality way. And then examples of other development that has been developed in similar instances, and what the character and the quality of materials might look like. And then active frontage, being very deliberate about where we want the frontage activated, where it wants to be retail, and where it doesn't need to be retail. We don't want to try to spread retail everywhere, because there won't be enough demand to support that. So some of the green frontages would be active frontages, but not retail. So they could be residential lobbies or office lobbies or community rooms, things like that. Whereas the red frontages would be where we would want to focus retail, so that we really concentrate that in the downtown where we want it. Just some examples of how those active frontages might play out. And then other development standards, we won't go into all the detail, but there are development standards and guidelines for each of these 5 categories of issues. So off-street vehicular and bike parking, loading access, public realm design, open space and private realm, and public art. So we tried to address each of these individually, get very specific about what we'd like to see. You can see an example on the right of the public realm design, and how some of the standards play out for that. On the first one, off-street parking, one of the big moves was to reestablish parking standards for the private uses, and actually lowering what had been required in the previous zoning. You have a very rich transit environment here, so you can leverage that and actually lower your parking requirements for different land uses, for residential buildings and office buildings, and that will make those projects more feasible. And so we worked carefully on that, went back and forth several times to get that right and dial it in. But in order to do that, the plan really needs to be accompanied by better connectivity throughout. So you have to make it easy for people that want to take transit or want to ride a bike or walk. The environment needs to be there where they're comfortable doing that. So that was a big part of the plan, and that's coupled with these parking reductions. And a lot of those changes plays out in the streetscape plan, which we looked at with all of you in December. And there are a few excerpts from the streetscape plan in the specific plan. It's sort of a very brief summary of the streetscape plan. But as you may recall, the big moves of the streetscape plan are on El Camino Real. We're reducing to 2 lanes in each direction with left-hand turn pockets. And then that opens up all kinds of possibilities for protected bike lanes, for wider sidewalks, for really generous transit stops. It's really transformative, and it's going to make a huge difference on El Camino Real. Still on El Camino Real here, but on the frontage street portions, addressing one of your comments about just let's widen those sidewalks right away. We had kept the diagonal parking in those areas, but it is a bit of a constrained sidewalk. And I think the sentiment with this group is, you know, let's be bold. Let's go ahead and widen sidewalks there as well and convert those parking spaces to parallel. So that's what this view is showing on the frontage street portion of El Camino Real. And then in the non-frontage street portion, we had a great discussion, I thought, about flexibility. You know, do we have the parking protected bike lane, which is what's shown here, or do we have what we referred to as a multi-use curb lane, where you really want that area next to the curb for parklets and for deliveries and things like that. And I think the outcome of that discussion with all of you was, let's have flexibility. You know, it may be that in certain segments or at certain times of the evolution of this corridor, we want one or the other, but then we should be able to convert to the other when that's appropriate. So let's build flexibility into the plan. And so that's what we've done. In either configuration, the bike lanes would always go behind the bus stops. So you have that measure of protection for the bikes and reduce the conflicts with the buses as they stop. And then on Broadway, the big move here again was to convert from diagonal parking to parallel. And again, it just creates a much wider sidewalk and really facilitates a lot of the outdoor public space, you know, social functions that everybody wants to see, outdoor dining and gathering spaces. So that would also be quite a big transformation for Broadway. And I mentioned this a little bit, but the TDM, the transportation demand management policies, go along with the parking policies. So, you know, we need to have ways of managing the parking resources, the possibility for shared parking, the prioritizing of micromobility helps you with the parking management. So all of these things are working together, and the plan goes into some level of detail. However, there is more work to be done in the implementation. A detailed parking study is needed. A detailed parking management plan is, you know, not part of this specific plan. That's work that would need to be done subsequently in the implementation of the plan. And then lastly, the implementation section of the specific plan gives some direction on specific actions to achieve the vision, and also potential funding mechanisms and financing tools that can be used to implement the needed improvements. So that is the end of my presentation. I'll turn it back over to Darcy.
Great. Well, that was very informative. Learned a lot of things, especially about past feedback. So I appreciate, Jim, you working in the feedback, because we've had a number of these meetings and gotten some really great feedback that we've worked hard to incorporate. So now we can turn it back over to the mayor to step us through the feedback, questions and answers portion.
Thank you, Darcy. So I think we have here about 20 minutes left. That's like 10 and 10. So let's go with Planning Commission first. Do you want to raise hands, or would you like me to call on you? All right, I'm going to call on you. Chris Del Negro, do you have your comments or questions first, please?
All right, so I guess one of the elements, I guess, that I'm most worried about right now is the fact that we are moving so much towards rental-only accessible housing in this region. You know, almost all projects have been rental-only. You don't see any new projects that have opportunities for home ownership, particularly in the entire region. Is there something that we're doing that's biasing that way? there's something in our policies that should help to balance this back out, or could balance it back out.
Would you like us to answer that now, or do you want to hold? Do you
I
want
think
to Mayor on whether you would want us to take some time to answer the questions or just note them?
Yeah, let's answer any questions and take comments. And if we could just limit everybody to like 3 minutes, that would make everybody get a chance to speak. So if you're going to
Have a
ask,
quick answer, but it's largely market driven. We've seen the pendulum swing back and forth through the cycles. Right now, the investment world and the development world is definitely catering towards apartments. Often they'll record a condominium map, reserving the right to sell them in the future when they build those apartments, and we fully support that and enable that through our processes. But right now it's really market driven that the apartments are very strong. But I will predict, real estate's cyclical, so we'll come back. We certainly would support condominiums if they came forward.
Yeah, the other thing I also want to reiterate every time that I see it, which is that there's no such thing as parking protected bike lane. It is a parking endangered bike lane. I will tell you that every single time. That is something I still want. Obviously, I like the fact that you're talking flexibility because we need to flexibly move away from one of those poor designs. And I guess I'll leave it at that right now for my comments.
thank you, Chris. Well, I'm not going to take my 2 minutes, but just to comment on what Chris is saying with regards to building us home ownership. The conversions in the future, maybe we can make that easier in the planning process. So that might be something to think about. Maureen Davis.
First, this is an amazing amount of work. Thank you very much. I feel like this is better than the initial draft, that then there's going to be a draft and then there's going to be another draft after that. This is amazing. I did hear a direction to look at these detailed tables and see what's, okay and what's not. And I was looking at that, and I just have some questions as to explain it's the table 5.2, the permitted, conditionally permitted, non-permitted, and active land uses. And the column that I put most question marks in was the active ground floor use. And I get that we want active uses. And in my mind, anything that smacks of retail-ish, where there are people be coming in and out, I would think would fit in there, but I don't know why some things are not. For example, why not pet grooming? Why would that not be an okay thing? I just was curious. So that one, and the why wouldn't that be some place where somebody would go often? It might be fun to look inside and watch the doggies and kitties being groomed if they were coming in and out of the shop. I was just curious, how do particular kinds of commercial businesses land in the no category on active, I guess is my question. Like, why not a tattoo parlor? It's in the no. Why not? Doesn't seem like a thing that should be forbidden on the ground floor of a thing. So that it's just a question. You don't have to necessarily answer it, but how do things land in that column is basically my question.
Well, it was collaborative effort of the city team and our consultants. And we note that there are only certain areas where we require those active uses. So most of Broadway, for example,
Would still be cool. Okay.
Yeah. So
all right.
for example, on El Camino, yeah, you could have less active uses, but on Broadway, we really want to encourage those active encourage as many active uses as possible. And pet grooming, sometimes it's more industrial, sometimes they have a great storefront, but sometimes they turn their back on the street, right?
True.
So that was the thinking here. But we'll take another broad brush at these active uses and make sure we.
Right. I guess the one thing I think about is that we have some developments. There's one nice mixed use development at the south end of San Mateo Avenue in San Bruno, and it's got all this ground floor stuff, and I think it's all vacant except for the leasing office. And so any restriction just feels like maybe we shouldn't restrict it, just in case we need all options possible to fill a ground floor space, was I guess where that was coming from. And that's enough for now.
Thank you, Maureen.
Mm-hmm.
How about Alan Wong, Commissioner Wong?
Yes, good evening, everybody. I got 3 bullet points here. I think one, it'd be good to just cross-reference general plan, residential guidelines, any parking development plans. All these plans shouldn't be separate. They should make sure that they're all integrated and coordinated so that it forms a whole rather than one person taking something out of context and then running with it like a developer thinking that they can design something here when it really doesn't fit in. So cross-referencing those. I want to think about how this dictates priorities in terms of like CIP. Darcy just mentioned briefly infrastructure needs. But we went over a plan last night where people east of El Camino really pointed out flooding issues and circulation issues, because going into some of these neighborhoods like Marina Vista, there's only one street going into their neighborhood, Center Street, and so forth. And so need to think about making sure that if there are developments that either we prioritize, that we can accommodate those large developments so that it addresses these circulation issues, reduces the impacts of neighborhoods, and then also maybe even generate funds or for the benefits, make sure it goes in or it identifies and prioritizes some of these major needs in our city for infrastructure and CIP. We don't want people on East of El Camino more flooding issues, and which are very life safety issues. The community anchor, the downtown mixed use, third point, neighborhood commercial mixed use areas. I'm thinking about making sure that these developments in these key areas, Millbrae Square areas, that they always retain the community feel and openness and welcoming to the community. Because if we put in a predominantly residential to the max, large residential building right in Millbrae Square, I'm thinking that, that would be deterrent from people coming into our city, visitors, guests, using the restaurants and commercial facilities, just like they might feel like there's so many people living there that I'm invading their neighborhood. It's not really for me. And even in our neighborhoods across Millbrae, they might get that same feeling that that's another neighborhood and I don't want to go down there because I feel like I'm going into someone's backyard. So we need to think about these features, and especially like residential design guidelines, how to make those special development areas more commercial, more open, more welcoming, parks, fountain areas, common spaces, so that we always retain our community anchor to feel like, everyone is welcome there. Those are three things. I may toss staff more bullet items if I jot it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Quigg.
I unmuted. Great presentation, just as Maureen had said. You guys do a fabulous job, and also staff. I think that we need to put a little bit more emphasis, and you talked on it very quickly just a little bit ago about the home ownership. And it seems like there's a lot of rentals coming on board, and I would like to see more townhomes. Townhomes are fabulous, and or 2-unit buildings. The one project on Hermosa, I thought we had approved as condos, and they're actually trying to lease everything. So maybe we need to evaluate, and I think that was brought up a little bit, on how they can be transferred quickly from apartments to condos. And Pintera also was approved as condos. And at the time they said, right now we're just doing apartments, but they were built to the condo specifications. It seems like that when people have ownership, they tend to do more and more within the community because they're long-term. People that rent are usually here today and gone in a couple of years, their life changes and they don't seem to develop, or appears like that they don't develop that sense of community as when somebody purchases something. So I think we need to make sure that we encourage condominiums or townhomes. And I did see it in some of the areas there, but I think we could have more, especially like up here in North Millbrae, where there's housing, and then it's El Camino. But some of these areas should really emphasize townhomes or 2 units, and there are more up here in the North County. So I would like to see more of that. I still have quite a few reservations about changing the parking in the downtown from diagonal to parallel parking. And I just don't know if we've done enough, probably never have enough research on that, but just kind of to know that it will work better. I think that's it. There's always something that you think of after you finish talking, but right now, I think that's it. Thank you.
So just to be clear, Darcy, if you could help me out here, this is not about design or a title of ownership. This is just about what would be allowed.
Correct.
So, you know, home ownership doesn't need to be into the plan.
Correct. Yeah, there are no barriers in the plan to treating condominiums similarly to apartment, and we certainly, as I said earlier, will support them. What Commissioner Quigg said is sometimes, you know, we even approve them as condominiums, and then they decide to rent them, and there's no legal mechanism that the city can apply to require that, other than, you know, welcome them with warm arms.
So zoning is housing, however you take it is the way they can take it. All right, we have Chair Commissioner Joe.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, everyone. And I would concur that a lot of work obviously went into this plan, and I really commend the staff and staff of the company for, I'm blanking out, for developing this plan and for taking into consideration all the comments that were made before. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot is in terms of the design, and I've mentioned this before even when I was applying initially as a commissioner, is Millbrae is really on the cusp of a lot of change. And at the same time, there is a lot of history and character that we want to preserve and honor. And one of the comments in the packet, I was trying to look for it, but on page 68 when it talks about development standards, we talk about proximity to historic buildings. And that's one thing that I'm hoping to be able to see maybe a little bit more detail in the future. Just considering the historic buildings, we don't have any officially on a registry. We don't necessarily have ones that will qualify to be on a registry, but there are definite landmarks that people do consider as kind of the character of Millbrae. So I think, I mean, I'm sitting in one right now in Silver Building, and you know, it's actually right in the middle of the developmental area that we're talking about, downtown district. And possibly, I think the building height in that area, and I scattered all my notes everywhere, I think it's up to 85 feet. So I just want to be a little bit mindful of not just this building, there's, you know, 60 Mile House, there are the other, just to be, have a little bit more, it might be nice to see a little bit more consideration of that in the plan as a whole, because I think there are buildings that are very clear in our area. Not that we want to hamper development, but just to be able to, at the same time, incorporate that somehow. So that's just one thought. And my second thought is related to that, which has to do with existing neighborhoods. And Commissioner Wong mentioned, you know, Marina Vista, Bayside Manor. You know, it's nice to have all the change. I think one thing that we need to really be cognizant of, it's not just the step backs, but it's also everything else that as we change will impact not just the neighborhoods east of El Camino, but also to the west of the downtown area, and to kind kind of have more, to be more cognizant of that, and maybe to build into the plan in terms of, you know, when things are being developed here, what is the plan for engaging the community, being aware of their concerns, something to that, you know, the notice, public notice, and making sure that people are engaged and aware of what's happening so that it's not something that catches people by surprise. So that's just a general comment that I would put out there. And then design review standards, again, the staff has put a lot of work into this, and so I actually want to dig deeper into that in making sure that we have very specific objective design review standards. I noticed that there are a lot in here already, which is great. And I promise I'm going to be delving into it much more, but I think that's something that we should really pay attention to as a group to make sure that we have specific design review standards. Because just saying, well, I want it to look like this or to be similar, you know, compatible, that's not going to wash when it comes to state regulations in terms of what we can and cannot do. So I'd like to, I personally will be paying attention more to that. And I think that that would be something that would really be good for us to hone down. I understand that this is a document for many, many years until it gets renewed, maybe decades from now. So we do need to build in some flexibility into it, but at the same time, I think it's really important to have the as specific as we can get objective design review guideline. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean. Sorry about that. My house is going a little crazy here. Can we go to Councilmember Schneider, please?
Thank you. And to staff and to the consultants, I think you've done a lovely job. You've added some really great photographic examples. Staff and I had a meeting this morning, so to the public, we've already talked about the first 40 pages on that. And then Darcy, you were very kind to me because as I continued reading through the rest of the document, there was the public art, there was a little bit, but I'm going to emphasize a little bit on green infrastructure. I would still like to see a lot more, and I've got examples that I can give to you, where just the insertion of green infrastructure will tell a developer that, you know, a bioswale in front of the building, or the city when we redo Broadway, like Burlingame Avenue has these bioswales near restaurants that actually make incredibly attractive seating areas, but you've got to have the curb cutout for stormwater to get into the bioswales on that. So I know we talked about that. I just found a number of places in pages 40 to 70 where it could be inserted. I very much appreciate Chair Joe's comments about historical. We talked about that this morning. What I was told by staff is that City Council may need to set aside additional funds to do that research. It will also help us when we deal with the transportation agencies, because having designation under CEQA or NEPA is an additional tool. So I would love to see council consider additional funding for that historical work. I think we have beautiful buildings. I went down the Frontage Road where Fiddler's Green is, and collectively, it's just such a lovely area. Our parklets, I think, are covering a little bit, so there's some work there, but we need to hang on to that really lovely feel that we have on certain blocks. I mentioned the green infrastructure. Over on the parking section, I tried to look for it, Darcy, with the additional safe bicycle parking, which usually means an enclosed shelter. To me, that's an artward opportunity, but I'm a little concerned that people might put them near corners and that'll block visibility. I'm sure you guys have thought about that, but I didn't see it in writing anywhere. I didn't see, there was one thing that I would actually tell you I'd vote no on. On table D4, it talks about if you're creating a parking lot of 1 to 9 spaces, that there is no vegetation required. Okay, I'm a noise freak. One of the few things that we can do to mitigate the noise from the railroad, from BART, from Caltran, and the airport is to have more plants. Plants have the ability to absorb sound and not bounce it. The more hardscape, every parking lot, every cemented culvert can bounce noise. So I would love to see that one section for 1.9. They may be saying there's not enough ground square footage, but there is an amazing example at the Valero gas station of a green wall that's behind the market at Valero and along the fence there. And in the alley, if you turn down that alley, what you see is a beautiful green wall. So I think if we looked at vertical planting, just like those 2 trellises on Safeway that I just haven't had the chance to nag Safeway about, we could be doing a lot more in absorbing air pollution and calming noise by doing more vertical planting on that. So yeah, I just don't see all parking spaces should have it. And for the public, every parking lot, every parking place is a place that on our hot days, and we're going to have many more of them, those are heat islands. And one of the few things that can cool our entire community and make it pleasant to go out is to have canopy cover, which are trees. So most of our tree drawings, if you say one tree per 5 parking places, you're really not covering much of the asphalt. So I would like to see more coverage of asphalt, even if that means we're putting up solar panels, because that will cool things down too. That's just looking at that. I'm very concerned that whether it's whatever department of the city, that everything we do has a component of climate resiliency work. All of us, public, private, residential, we have to do that. I have more comments, but again, I really appreciate all the work that you did with adding fixtures that I think are much more reflective of where we want to be. Thank you for that. And I would also say that bicycle racks can have a lot of
Did Councilmember Schneider freeze?
I think she just accidentally muted.
I don't see mute on her name.
I do.
Okay, let's go.
my last comment on the bicycle stuff. A lot of the work that we'll do with bicycle and multimodality can also be art. So we can combine the 2 of them. And I'm really grateful that you finally got the art fee in on the plan. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Can we go to Councilmember Fong, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, staff. This is an excellent document. We talked quite a bit of that today earlier, but some of the things that I summarized, as we were considering, density modifications and FAR and some of those objective zoning standard, I think we should consider focusing on more of a form-based factor type zoning standard, such as massing, the height, the setback, and the open space requirement on a per unit basis. I envision our downtown core, right, which is sort of where the majority of our financial district in the downtown on Broadway and southern portion of the El Camino Real should be more flexible and more generous in terms of FAR and density, so that we can accommodate more flexible development options, particularly more efficient and more affordable units to be built. And as we move further away from the core downtown district, as we move further north, then we can button that up a little bit based on those objective standards. Now, I'd like to see us put in some land use policies and standard that would incentivize development of active storefront of approximately 15 to 20 feet on the ground floor, and then second story with some kind of research, flexible use office space or co-working space, and then some efficiently designed residential unit on the higher story. These extra office space would be valuable in bringing in some more daytime foot traffic, and that would be very supportive of our future economic development. And continue to encourage affordable by design units that are more efficient and more cost effective in nature. I think that's going to be important. Christopher Del Negro, Commissioner Del Negro earlier pointed out, we have a lot of sort of a rental unit coming in, and I think a lot of that has to do with affordability. So being able to bring in more affordable by design unit would certainly be able to achieve higher ratio in terms of ownership units. Encourage the use of more green roofs and rooftop deck as open space. And I think that will give us a more eco-friendly and more sustainable development, so that we can retain these roof water and be able to reuse some of these gray water features for many different purposes. A generation of clean and renewable energy, using solar panel. Some of these things should be more clearly codified in order to achieve, somewhat of a net zero on these new mixed-use development moving forward here. So at least on common area, electrical usage, we really should strive to achieve more of a net zero, rather than looking at it from number of square feet of solar panel. We should consider looking at sort of an energy calculation on these new development, and so we can achieve more of a net zero type scenario. Now, in terms of parking, there's a lot of discussions about that. And as we consider widening our sidewalk on Broadway and now Camino Real with the frontage road to create a more pleasant pedestrian experience, we should consider remove those curb cuts on Broadway and some of the El Camino Real, so that to avoid pedestrian and vehicular traffic conflicts, so that we can create a more pedestrian friendly environment. And that would be certainly helpful to really give this active storefront its maximum usage. We can consider using some of the rear alley on Broadway and the frontage road for service vehicle access. And having parking in lieu fee was going to be important for us moving forward here to support our developing parking capacity. And bike parking in some of the new developments as a way to encourage using bike as a last mile of transportation, so that our future residents could take advantage of public transit and also use it within our city as a day-to-day grocery shopping type transportation, especially those who live close to the downtown area. And as we envision our downtown development, we should consider the use of paseo or promenade type land use, which is somewhat more pedestrian friendly and with somewhat limited vehicular access as well on certain block that makes sense. And thinking of our downtown would be a bit more like, imagine like Bay Street in Emerville or Santana Row, where we have center medians that could be capable for usage of outdoor dining or special event purposes. We can even, try a certain block where we could, put bow log or blockages where we could test out some of using these features. And so that we can create Millbrae as more of an event destination or festival featured block destination. So I think those are going to be valuable. So with limited time, Mayor, that's all for now.
Yes, limited time for this huge report. So we have next, Councilmember Holliver, please.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for those excellent comments, and thank you to everyone who put in a lot of hard work on this document. I think we are definitely moving quite far in the right direction here. I think the building heights look good, and the massings, spacing between buildings looks very well. A couple of comments I had, I noticed that the commercial preference area was added as one of the land use designations. I guess it's not really its own land use designation, but it fits under the corridor mixed use. And I wonder if that could be really any more than just a preference. If there's really any teeth to that in terms of, what percentage of developments would be commercial versus residential in those areas. I know Councilmember Fun, for example, mentioned second floor, offices, maybe for startup businesses or different types of businesses. So I think that would be something to look into. I also noticed that commercial preference area does not include some of the parcels where we currently have hotels. For example, the Fairfield Inn and La Quinta Inn and Millwood Inn are not within that zone. So I think we may want to look at adding those into that zone and perhaps also extending it further down closer to the MSASP area. I think in terms of the active frontages, I had some questions about the non-retail frontage that shows for sort of the northern end of El Camino, and why I think it was sort of briefly explained as to why those were designated as non-retail, but would retail be prohibited there, or would it just not be required? And there's green areas there. And what else would be allowed? In terms of maybe small offices or medical offices, things like that. I know we do have a number of small businesses, restaurants in that area that have been successful a long time, and if the properties were to be redeveloped, it would lose those businesses there. So we may want to look at expanding that area to include retail frontages to keep them active day and night. There was also on the page regarding TDM strategies, I think a lot of excellent strategies there. I also think maybe we should consider shuttles as an option, specifically for larger developments, to provide that last mile connection to the transit corridor. I'm thinking particularly about where the El Rancho development is, that technically is walkable to the transit station. It's not the most conducive, so some type of a shuttle service I think would be helpful. And I'm going to sound like a broken record here to my colleagues, but I noticed one of the maps, I think it's on page 53, showed a special study crossing at Chadbourne, and I don't know if that was just an oversight, but I believe we have eliminated that. And in some of the other slides, it is not shown there. So in the interest of time, that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Oliver. And last but not least, Vice Mayor Peppin, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try to stick to the time limit here. So I agree with my colleagues on many things that have already been said. I don't think we got into really having signage, very visible signage. I do agree we need to be very concerned with climate control. So stormwater runoff and anything that happens throughout that corridor, I think is very important. I am concerned about the bike safety, so we're going to have to work on that somewhat. In addition to that, lighting. We want to be a destination place. I think the infrastructure for not only just regular lighting, but maybe holiday lighting on El Camino there, especially as it goes through the downtown, would make things really very exciting at certain times of year. So if we're planning here, let's put it in. I do believe if we can try to emphasize the purchasing of homes in condominiums or townhouses or something like that is important these days. I didn't think we talked about parking meters either, but if we're going to have all this development and stuff, we're going to need to turn over parking. Artwork, if you'll notice, if anybody's been downtown Van Ness, all the construction that's going on there and that thoroughfare, some very interesting artwork just went up there. So please take a look at that. And did we not talk about a roundabout? As you come off El Camino, I think it's Millwood. Can somebody pull that up real quick?
Vice Mayor, I think it was on Meadow Glen.
Meadow Glen, I think.
Broadway. And that had to do with a project that's currently pending and under review as an improvement.
Okay, so that would be great because it's a very complicated intersection. I've seen people go down the wrong way. So I think that is about it. Thank you.
Mayor?
I'm sorry, good work to staff.
I just wanted to say to staff that this was an incredible amount of material. And I think between the 10 of us, we covered just a lot for you to review on all of this. I do want to see before we say goodbye to our next meeting, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? I saw somebody first. Councilmember Schneider, I'm going to ask you to please wait till you can talk to staff after. We went over a little bit, and I want to, in the respect for all, we have 15 minutes before we go to our next meeting.
You do 2 minutes on the timer? You got a couple people.
Oh, I do? I don't see anybody's hands raised.
And Nathan Chan is up, so.
Okay, Nathan, thank you for helping me, Vice Mayor. Nathan, can you please go?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this important proposal before our city. I had a question about the corridor mixed use designation and why it stops where it does. It seems to me that it could be extended even further northward. I noticed that Broadway widens after Meadow Glen, and it continues to be, a median separated road all the way up until Millwood. And there's already some fairly large buildings there, fairly large commercial sites. I don't understand why that's currently designated as a residential mixed use and has height limits that are the same as downtown Broadway. It seems like there's a missed opportunity to increase the development potential of that area. The other thing that I wanted to draw attention to is something that I don't think I've heard anyone discuss yet, which is the sort of the opportunity sites map. I noticed there were I would love to know what criteria were used to select those opportunity sites, because there's some places that, frankly, I'm kind of confused why the city thinks they might be redeveloped. So, for example, Pape and Company is marked as an opportunity site, as is the large and relatively new development north of Millbrae Pancake House. Does the city think that these have a realistic chance of being developed into new housing units for the purpose of meeting RETA? I'd like to hear more explanation of that. Maybe that's coming in the housing element, but I already have questions about those sites. So thank you. Those are all my comments for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Next up is Angelina Callahan.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak up regarding, I'm a resident in East Millbrae, and I logged in early for our next meeting and came upon this by happenstance. But I learned so much that I didn't know was happening and being planned for our city. And it sounds like there's a lot of exciting things happening, but as Commissioner Allen mentioned, the East Millbrae residents, we are really concerned about water and flooding. I mean, 2 days before Christmas, we had people die. I live on Landing Lane, where both October 24th and December 23rd, we had flooding all the way up to our front door, all the way to the top stairs of our garage. Our cars totaled from the water damage, loss of so much. And, we pretty much just got dumpsters brought to our house to say, here, sorry, you lost everything. Here's a free dumpster. And I'm really concerned with all this new development. Where is that water going to go? The city pump can't even handle it. It doesn't sound like there's any plans or work, just a lot of finger pointing between the airport and the city. And I'm really nervous. This is my home, our belongings, our safety, our kids. Our kids on 2 days before Christmas are packing their bags, waiting to see if water is going to come in the house or not, and if we're going to have to run to a hotel, and calling hotels that take dogs 2 days before Christmas. And, and our kids are scared when it rains now. So I really severely hope that there's serious plans for the water. Thank you.
We take that comment very seriously, every one of us. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
David, Craig?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, hi. Welcome, Madam Mayor and members of the council. One thing that kind of struck my mind on this thing is you're increasing the density quite dramatically, and you're increasing height quite dramatically, which I applaud. That's fine. But I'm wondering, have you taken into consideration the impact of the state's density bonus laws in terms of you may be putting an 85-foot height limit in an area, But if someone was to put housing in there with the state density bonus law, it could go up to 100 feet theoretically. They can potentially add 3 floors. So I think you should consider what the implications of that are. And then right now, almost every housing developer is using the density bonus law to operate with. The other thing is when we were looking at the station area plan back in the good old days, the plan was set up so that there was a basic height and density set up. And then if the developer wanted to increase it, they could do it with community benefits, which I thought was a good approach. And the goal was that they would in fact go to the densities that we were hoping for, but that the community would get community benefits out of it. So I think you really need to look at that height, all those height limits in relationship to what could happen to you that you don't really want to happen in terms of maybe more height or whatever. My feeling is I love to get as much height as you can, but you know, if you feel comfortable with 85 feet, you don't want to see a 100-foot tall building there, you know, because of the state density bonus or some other reason. So that's my main comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I think, well, those are the only hands I see. Did I miss anybody? Somebody help me.
No, I don't see anyone else with their hand raised, Mayor.
Okay, well, I just can't thank staff and were that slide of everybody that participated in this plan, this immense amount of material. It's very exciting, and thank you all for doing this for the city of Millbrae. So we will get it right, and we have 2 more meetings on this. Is that correct? I believe.
Our next meeting will be on the much awaited housing element. We don't have a date for it yet, but we'll come back to you when that's ready for also preliminary draft review. And we'll be discussing programs and policies, but a lot of the hard work on the housing element, honestly, you've done in this specific plan, and you're ahead of the game with your housing element in that regard. So you should be very proud of the work you've done here to prepare you for a more successful housing element.
Darcy, thank you so much. All right,
City manager has his hand up, and can somebody mention what the height limit is for the airport? Thanks.
City manager Tom Williams.
The height limit is dependent on the geographic location, but it ranges anywhere from 100 feet to, Darcy, I think that the top height is 160 feet.
Yeah.
Depending on you know, where a development is along the El Camino corridor or, you know, proximity to the airport. I just real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to Darcy, her great leadership on this. Thanks to WRT and the design team, the planning commission, the city council. An awful lot of work has come into this, and I think it's a fantastic, you know, shaping up to be a fantastic plan. We're embracing what the state of California is mandating with the big heavy stick with state legislation. A lot of this is being put on this, and I think we need to embrace it, plan for it properly with good urban design, good architectural elements and features and quality materials. And I think just my hats off to everybody involved in this process. This is, you know, doing a general plan and a specific plan is no easy task. So I just wanted to recognize all of you and thank you for the great work.
I think you're part of that team too, so thank you. With so we are at 6:55. We're going to adjourn this meeting, and for council, we have another Zoom link in your email to come back in 5 minutes. Thank
Mayor,
you.
I heard that there were some other people, other citizens or the public that logged on to this meeting early for the city council meeting.
Yeah,
so I think our
Angelina
city
mentioned
clerk,
that.
our acting city clerk, Eduardo, everybody needs to log off and log on to the.
We'll be using the same link here.
We will be using the same link.
Yes,
Okay.
same link.
So do we log off?
Don't have to.
No,
You
we
don't have to.
stay on, Mayor. Yeah.
All right, we'll start in 4 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks everyone for your comments. Very
Thank you.
helpful.
Bye.
Bye-bye.